Damon Benning to give you a recap of last weekend's victory over UTEP and to preview week 2 against Colorado, starting with Nebraska's 47 victory. I'm going to say it so we can get out of the way. I understand it was UTEP. I heard it, saw it all weekend. However, the way in which Nebraska executed, I thought was the most impressive piece. Also going to throw out there, since 2019, Nebraska is now 1-0 to start the season. So some feel-good energy for the Huskers. What was your first reaction on Saturday?
I never apologize for the opponent, right? Like, that's kind of my thing. It's hard to win in college football. You could have been Oregon and Idaho, or, you know, he had the first half that Ohio State had against Akron, and, you know, even Iowa got off to a slow start against Illinois State. So never apologize for getting wins. Nebraska did what they were supposed to according to the opponent, and it's been a long time since I've been able to say that.
Yeah, and I think the numbers that jump off the page are what are exciting for most people. It's on the offense, of course, which is a little bit of a switch up from past years. So the thing that I found the most interesting, though, I'm going to throw some things out here, is one, the offense was incredibly balanced. You had 223 yards on the ground, 284 passing yards. And then second, they had 80 plays, where last year they averaged 61. They had 50 in the first half. So that was also a change. 11 for 17 on third downs, 4 for 5 in the red zone. Out of all those numbers that you saw on offense, what jumped out to you the most?
So I like the 4 out of 5 in the red zone, right? And they're getting touchdowns and not field goals. I think that's critical. And I also liked, within that red zone stuff, short yardage run game, where your opponent knows you want to run the football and you can still run it anyway. That's something, if Nebraska wants to have success going forward, it'd be nice if that was portable.
Yeah. I think we saw why the coaching staff had a hard time with the running back room so far. I mean, it seemed like each player brought something different. There's a variety in their depth. What did you make of what you saw from the running backs this past weekend?
So I like that. It was a lot of NFL-ish kind of things where you situationally use a guy. I think Ramir and Emmett Johnson give you a little more explosive play capability, a little better pass catchers out of the backfield. And Dowdell and Irvin kind of give you the hammers, right? Gabe is a slasher. Dante is a guy that loves kind of, when he sees that crease, he's very explosive kind of in that hole. So he's what I call a heavy runner. Goes into contact well. So situationally, I like how they use those guys. And you can get away with that, Ave, if guys know their roles. Right? You know, there's this tendency, like this is just me being selfish and insecure because I was a running back and a little bit of a prima donna. But, man, if you're only going to call my number outside the 40-yard line, I better rip off as many long touchdown runs as I get. Because if we get inside the 10 and you're not going to call my number, I'll be like, oh, shoot, this guy, Gabe, Irvin, and Dowdell will have the most 4-yard touchdown runs ever, right? So it keeps you, I say all that to say, it keeps you competitive. But situationally, I like the way it shakes out.
I think in the press conference after, I think Emmett was like, Coach, I can do that too.
I can do. Listen, that's power. There's a couple down blocks and a kick out. I want the ball too, right? So, but if I'm Coach Barthel, I'm like, hey, EJ, close out that run on the 5-yard line. We don't have to worry about it.
I asked you last week, when will we have an idea that you think Dylan has settled in? When do you feel like you saw that Saturday?
So I felt like he was comfortable from the get-go, but one thing I really liked is he, early on with the fade ball that wasn't hauled in by Nayor, I thought was his best throw of the day. It was early. It was out in front. It was still the only place his guy could go get it. And if Nair had to do that, he'll make that catch 9 out of 10 times. The other thing was a little more subtle. He threw arguably his worst ball of the afternoon into double coverage late across the middle, going into a pressure situation at the half, and came right back with a whole throw where he dropped it in the bucket to Nayor. So I'm like, okay, stayed in the moment, kind of unflappable, because it was a pretty poor decision over the middle, right? Little sidearm, drop it down, give my guy a chance. And Nebraska was like, okay, we believe in you. You'll be able to dust that off. How about a shot play before the end of the half? And he made good. That was pretty impressive for his age.
Yeah, we'll stay right there at the receiving core. I mean, I think we had some names in mind that we were excited to see, and I think they lived up to that. Anything else that surprised you or anything you were just excited to see?
I like the fact that they were very efficient with catchable balls. You know, they made a couple of tough catches, and they rewarded good ball placement. Sometimes, you know, quarterbacks can kind of get in this deal where they trust in you and they're going to give you every opportunity as a receiver. You got to hold up your end of the deal. And I go back to something Raiola said early in the press conference last week was, I got to earn their trust.
Yeah.
And I felt like that's a nice little two-way street opportunity, totally. Right? Because for as much as he's vibing with Bonner and Fedoni and some of these old heads, Banks, you know, he understands he's got a role to play, and they on the receiving end held up their end of it too. Hey, great ball placement. The least I could do was squeeze the peel, and they did.
Yeah. You shared on Twitter after the game some things you saw on defense after watching it again. Were there things that you saw the second time around watching that you didn't catch the first time on Saturday?
Yeah, I really liked Nebraska's ability to kind of adjust on the fly. I felt like UTEP scored because of their tempo, and Nebraska was a little shook. So the one-on-one play that they gave up to Hartzog, which I thought was good coverage. I mean, he made a nice play on the ball, and Cam's a really good player. You'd like to see Malcolm make that play, but they were still a little shook from giving up the run play previous where they were slow to get lined up. So that play, it was just 3 plays, but it was 3 successive plays in which UTEP tempoed Nebraska, and it actually got them the score. I like the fact that Nebraska got their composure shortly after that. They get the safety, and then they really start to just constrict and stymie UTEP. A lot of times if Nebraska gives up that type of play, you can kind of hear the, oh, woe is me, here we go again kind of thing. Nebraska didn't. And I like the way that they adjusted formationally on how to get lined up in the secondary to how UTEP wanted to attack them.
Yeah, well, we know that'll be crucially important this coming weekend because we'll turn our attention now to Colorado. Highly anticipated, lots of emotion tied to this one, as we know. In week 1, NDSU challenged Colorado, and as I don't think that surprised many people around here, as we're all very aware of the program that NDSU has. Did you get a chance to watch that game, and what were your reactions of that one?
About 15 times, and I loved it. So, but I'm very cautious because how NDSU attacked Colorado is not necessarily built how Nebraska is, which is QB run game, kind of the elusive scrambles, Cam Miller really chunking NDSU in the middle of the field. But what Nebraska can do is utilize their tight ends. Same general outcome to take advantage of the second level or the linebacking core of Colorado. Those intermediate passing routes from hash to hash, from the snap of the ball to about 12 yards down the field. If Nebraska can control the middle of the field the way NDSU did with QB run game, I think they're more in position to really wear Colorado down.
Yeah, I was going to say NDSU was able to generate 449 yards of offense. They had 25 first downs. They really dictated the amount of time they were on the field.
You just got to finish drives, right? I mean, finishing rate is something they'll be kicking themselves about. And if Nebraska is kind of, if they're watching, which we know they are in terms of film study, finishing drives will be critical because I think from the 30 to the 20, they'll be able, I'm not going to say do what they want, but I do like Nebraska's matchup. It's can you generate points? Can you get back to 4 or 5 in the red zone? Because if you do, that's winning football.
Yeah. Is that where you see their defense being most vulnerable, in the middle of the field?
It is. It is, because I really like their D-line, and I like their back end. Obviously, you get guys like Hunter and Shiloh.
Right.
And I like how they combo their safeties. They've got a hammer and they've got a coverage guy at the safety spot where Shiloh's going to get down into the box. You got another guy that can play deep hole, and he's athletic. So I like the back and the front ends of that defense. If Nebraska wants to make some hay, it's got to be with that linebacking core.
Well, turning attention to offense, similar to Nebraska, Colorado had 504 yards of offense, but in complete opposite way in the which Nebraska did it. Almost all of their offense production was in the air. How does Nebraska tighten up what they did maybe even last weekend and to adjust to get ready for, I mean, they know where it's going to go. Number 12, number 5, they know where it's going. How do you get ready for that?
I think that's Nebraska's advantage. I mean, knock on wood, but I like Knighton and Butler and Dvorak and White against that offensive staff if Colorado can't run the football, right? So Coach Butler's got to be thinking, okay, my NFL experience says when these guys are dynamic outside the numbers and they can't run the ball. Remember, he spent time in Buffalo.
Absolutely.
He saw what it was like to defend Josh Allen with spectacular guys on the outside before Buffalo would commit to running the run game. So he would see that a lot. Now, Shedeur Sanders is talented, but he doesn't have Josh Allen arm talent where the field is always open to a guy like that. So for Coach Butler and Coach White, I could, without fear of the run game, I could see them really restricting throws outside the numbers and make Sanders play catch in the middle of the field, right? Because that's where Nebraska will have their help. So that cat and mouse game will be interesting, especially when you don't have a quarterback that wants to run the football. So without dynamic run game, handoff run game, or a quarterback that wants to get busy with his legs, I think Nebraska can settle in concept-wise to some good defenses.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how Nebraska's defensive line holds up as well. Especially last year, it felt like there was flashes of good at Colorado early.
Yeah, with the seventh. Yeah.
And then, I think having the home field advantage, I think there's a little bit of.
I could see them playing. I mean, how many guys are going to play? In the first quarter and a half against Colorado? They will come at Colorado in waves, 3 and 4 at a time, right? So, I mean, you've got Van Poppel and Wallen and Hutmaker and Ty Robinson and M.J. Sherman and Judy and Jamari Butler. I mean, you got James Williams. Like, they got some fellas that they can just bring in waves.
Yeah, absolutely. If you had to condense this game down.
I forgot about Cam Leonard, too. Sorry, Cam.
It's good depth, right? I guess. If you had to condense this game down to 3 things, what's the most important 3 things for Nebraska?
So I think points in the red zone will be critical. You don't want to get into a shootout, but with a total that's right around 60, you got to think that 30 is the benchmark. So you want to make potential touchdowns, but always get points on the board in the red zone. Number 2, I think you have to be committed, and it can fall in a couple of different windows. Committed to the run game, or committed to a physical style of football, or committed to staying in the moment. The word commitment will be huge because there'll be a ton of ebb and flows potentially with a raucous crowd. I think committing to who you are in terms of your identity will go a long way in this one. And then the third thing is, you have to find a way to generate a couple of takeaways. That's a hard offense to kind of stymie consistently. And Shedeur is very careful with the football. So when you have the opportunity to get a strip sack or to get a deflection or to get a guy on the ground, when you see a loose ball, make the most of it, because I think that can ultimately swing the pendulum.
The last thing is, you mentioned the crowd. I think it's been a while since Nebraska's had a very meaningful game at a nighttime atmosphere at Memorial Stadium. You've played under the lights in that situation. You played Colorado at home in that situation. Just what makes this such an exciting game? I know for the fan base already, for these players that haven't experienced maybe this rivalry for the first time, or just a game day like this. What's the most exciting piece about this matchup this weekend?
Yeah, I'm almost never a fan. I'm going to allow myself to be one this time, but for 2 reasons. Number 1 is the hatred of Colorado. But number 2, I've seen firsthand what a lathered up fan base can do in that environment. And you couple that with, I actually think this fan base, they like this team. So they will be very apt to get behind this team and give it their all. And it can be a miserable place to play. I want to see this a ton, because that means quarterbacks and defensive players aren't getting good communications through their devices. So the more that we can kind of see that play clock wind down, the more impact I know that the fan base is going to have, and they're very capable. This one could be flat out scary.
I think that sounds like a challenge, so we'll see what happens on Saturday. But there you have it for your recap and preview.